Well, hello, thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about learning, how it matters, and supporting the training investment in your organization. You know, it's interesting, if learning and development is a strategic objective that helps drive organizational success, then why is it that so many organizations today still view this as a nice to have? Why are learning budgets often the first to get cut? And why is the stated objective to develop and retain the best talent often evangelized but seldom practiced across organizations? You know, part of what we're looking to do here is to help elevate the role and the status of learning and development within organizations. I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. Kaplan, we have about 18,000 employees in 400 locations across 30 countries with over 1 million delegates each year. We're the largest financial education provider. We're global, we have unmatched service, and we provide unique portals and survey tools to our clients. Interestingly, if you look at our sector and the subject that I just brought up, the Wall Street Journal points out that learning platforms and interventions risk being too prescriptive with little or declining engagement that's slowing down the whole development process in a time when businesses need to be agile. Insights for Impact Learning, 33% of L&D professionals don't actually know if their interventions are benefiting performance. And staggeringly, 40% say that their line managers were not significantly involved in their employee training, and 33% said, for the most part, coaching was not used in their organization. Brandon Hall says only 40% of companies say that their learning strategy is aligned with their business goals. And Josh Burson points out that 84% of business leaders cite that the need for improved learning and development is a top priority, while 44% say it's urgent. So why is it then that so many organizations still view learning and development as a nice to have? Why isn't it tied more closely to the business objectives? The status of learning and function, or the learning function, should be as strategic as any other part of the business, whether that's sales, marketing, finance, IT. Ocean Tomo cites that a significant percentage of market capitalization in public companies is based on intangible assets, skilled employees, exceptional leaders, and knowledge. And companies that invest in developing leaders during significant transformation are 2.4 times more likely to hit their performance targets, according to McKinsey. So again, this is making the case, I think, for why learning and development needs to be and really is a strategic function. So in order to do that, learning must be connected to the commercial strategy. We have to understand the future business needs. We need to forensically examine the current employee capabilities. We need to design learning that's always commercially relevant to the business and develop skills and behaviors that fit and are relevant within their jobs for the expected commercial and competitive challenges that we all face. Tailored digital tools to help ensure that this learning spend is being optimized is also critical. And I'm not just talking about LMS or delivery tools. I'm talking about technology that scans the horizon, that scans the organization to look at where you have the greatest learning need. So use technology to understand the learning landscape of the organization, objectively evidence the learning gaps and priorities to avoid sheep dipping or one-size-fits-all, and tailor the learning design and experience to match the needs of the business and the individuals. This helps us to optimize the learning spend to the people and the teams of the greatest need. So one of the things that we've been doing that I think is very interesting and has been very, very helpful with our clients is to create scenarios or situational based learning where In our case, we work with a lot of financial services organizations, as I mentioned before. And there's a lot of technical knowledge and a lot of technical training that takes place. But how do we transfer that knowledge into the workplace in a way that's meaningful to the individual, that's beneficial to the business? And we do this by working with stakeholders and executives within our client organizations to help identify specific scenarios that people will be placed in real life. And then we set that up with questions around how they would react or behave in that given situation. So that really helps us to understand how well they're applying their knowledge within their job every day. So, for example, we present them with a question around a scenario. They could answer, as you see here, I don't know. That's a perfectly good answer. That tells us something about what we might need to do with that individual, or if we see this trend in part of the organization. Perhaps more interestingly, though, is we also measure their answer by asking the question, how confident are you in your answer? And so if we find people that are very confident but not competent, in other words, they answer the question wrong, but they're very confident in their answer, that presents a certain amount of risk or a potential for a learning initiative for the individual, or if we see it as a trend across the organization, for the organization. If they answer correctly, but they don't have a high degree of confidence, that could be some hidden talent that we want to go ahead and develop as well. And so from this, we're able to get efficient and effective learning design that's relying on real data that points to the areas of the business that are in greatest need of a learning intervention, that allows us to personalize it to the individual, or again, to see trends where we might want to develop learning interventions for certain parts of the organization. So in this example, you can see in the amber or kind of peach-colored area some hidden talent where people are very competent but not so confident. Or below in the red where we see people who are just not aligned with the needs of the organization at all. They've got the answer wrong, but they're very sure that their answer is right. And again, that can present a very strong designation as an area that needs additional learning or training, and it can also, in many cases, identify risk in the organization. So from that, we're then able to transfer the learning back into the workplace as a key objective. We want to influence the learning environment, both from the top down, but from the bottom up as well. We want people to be eager to learn. We don't want to put everybody through the same program all the time because that may not be what they need. That helps us socialize the learning. We need to have that senior advocacy that shows up, that truly understands the tie back between learning and the business objectives. We have to focus on the learning objectives in terms of not just the business need, but the individual need, and define the expected manifestations of the change that we want to see in the business. What is it that's going to be the outcome from this learning? And apply the proper measurement and tools to see if that's what we're getting. So some of the diagnostics, like the one that I just showed you, if we run that prior to a program or a learning intervention and we're able to run it a few months later, we should be able to see a measurable difference in the behaviors of our people in scenarios that are real, and get a better understanding of how this learning is actually impacting and creating measurable outcomes and results. So key to all of this as well is the democratization of learning. Very important to your commercial success. There's a lot of focus on high potential individuals who need to be trained. We want to find people who can take over as we look at succession planning and the number of people that are retiring and moving out of the organization and what we're going to do to replace that talent. But we need to go deeper into the muscle of the organization. We need to provide training as needed, when needed, by the people who need it most. And that's not just high potential individuals. It has to be appropriate and relevant to them and to their role. It needs to be engaging and compelling for the individual. It has to be timely and accessible and affordable. It needs to be consistent, and again, it needs to be personalized. And these things can best be accomplished if we're really using data-driven analysis to tell us where we need to direct our learning investment. So to that point, exceptional learning governance is critical to learning functions. Is the learning aligned to the enterprise strategy, to the business needs, and to the individual's expectation? What's being spent, where, why, and on whom? What's the commercial purpose? And what is the impact? Is this a cost or an investment? And oftentimes, unfortunately, learning and development is considered to be a cost because we don't do a good job of tying it back to the business objectives, of showing how this is going to impact the bottom line, of showing how this is going to impact the success of the organization. So it all comes back to that front end of designing well from data that we have, focusing on the right individuals and the right teams, and producing outcomes that can be measurable so that we can be perceived as a more strategic part of the organization. So the challenges that we face go from the individual learning expectations and how to make the learning exciting, relevant, engaging, certainly. There's a lot of focus on that right now. But also then, how does that fit into the business unit learning needs? Is it the same across the entire organization? And we have to look at the overall enterprise learning requirements as well. So it boils down to the opportunity to elevate the role and the status of the learning function and deliver measurable impact rests on two business needs. The first being the democratization of learning, making it affordable and appropriate, driving deep into the organization as opposed to just focusing on your high potential individuals. And then in terms of learning governance, being very careful and very thoughtful about the oversight and control over who and where and what we're doing in terms of training, because it has to tie from the individual back to the commercial needs of the organization. And so finally, the building blocks for successful L&D function: make it strategic. Make sure that it's connected back into what people do on a daily basis. Not just learning for the sake of acquiring knowledge, but learning from the standpoint of how do I apply that knowledge within my job every day. Make sure that it's tailored, that you're using these digital tools to scan the landscape, to understand where your biggest learning needs are. Make sure it's embedded and transferred back into the business in ways that actually have impact on performance, and make sure that it's available to everyone. I thank you very much for your time today. I look forward to any questions that you might have in the future. And if you need to get a hold of me, my contact information is at the bottom of the screen here. So thank you very much for your time.